quiz because I felt like everyone hadn't seen them really well, but that's them right in there. Okay. So that completes the hypobranchial muscles. And then we get to the branchiomeric. So remember, branchiomeric muscles are muscles that are part of the whole visceral arch system. They're connecting to the visceral arches, so mandibular, hyoid, and branchial arches. And they're organized in that same way: mandibular arch muscles, hyoid arch muscles, and branchial arch muscles. And so that's how I want to review them, is in terms of the arches. So we'll start with one that everyone got to see last time because it was in the way. This big sheet of muscle that stretches across from the mandibular cartilage of one side to the mandibular cartilage of the other side, and that would be the intermandibularis. So which arch do you think that belongs to?
Mandibular.
Mandibular arch, okay. So that's mandibular arch muscle ventrally. And then the remaining mandibular arch muscles we see dorsally here. And you guys can start, and I'll bring it around because I know you can't see it all over there. But remember, the spiracle lies in between the mandibular arch in front and the hyoid arch behind. So the mandibular arch muscles are going to be in front of the spiracle. And there's a big one right on the jaw joint here that's running from the palatal quadrate down to the mandibular cartilage, or Meckel's cartilage. And that's the jaw closing muscle, this big one. Here, this guy. And that would be Dr. Mandibuli. Okay, everyone likes that one. And did I mention that last time that that's sometimes used for fake scallops? I know, I think it might. Yeah, they take it from sharks and they slice it because it's kind of round, and they slice it up and make these little round things that look kind of like scallops and put sugar water in them to make them taste sweet and scallop-like. Anyway, so that's the ductor mandibuli there. And do you remember the muscular process on the palatal quadrate? There's this little kind of process that sticks up. It's called the muscular process. That's what that's attaching to. Okay. And then there's a couple of muscles that lie right in front of the spiracle, and there's one of them that's a pretty good-sized muscle that's running from the chondrocranium down to the palatal quadrate that lifts the palatal quadrate up, this guy here. And that would be called, this one right here. You see that okay? Here. So it's lifting up the palatal quadrate, so we would call it the it's actually the levator palatal quadrate.
Oh.
Okay, because it lifts up the palatal quadrate. But Jack brings up an important point. We've got an adductor mandibuli that closes the jaws. How do the jaws open? Coracomandibular, exactly. It's these hypobranchial muscles pull back on the lower jaw and open it. So there is no muscle called abductor. There is actually, we'll see when we get to tetrapods, a new muscle that appears called depressor mandibuli that opens them out. And we actually have a variant of that ourselves. Okay, so that's levator palatal quadrati. Just behind it, there's a little tiny muscle that you can see right there that runs down into the front wall of the spiracle. You see that? This guy right in here. And that would be the spiracularis muscle. And that helps open the spiracle. There's one more mandibular arch muscle, and we won't see it on my chart because I haven't gotten in there yet, but you'll see it later today when you get into the orbit. And that's a muscle called the preorbitalis that runs back from the floor or along the floor of the orbit to the palatal quadrate, and it kind of pulls the jaws forward. And you know how sharks stick their jaws out when they go to attack. That's the muscle that's involved in doing that. All right, so those are the mandibular arch muscles. For hyoid arch, if we go back ventrally, we can see there's an interhyoideus that lies deep to the intermandibularis. And so if we flip the intermandibularis back, and this I was able to do on this shark more easily than you could on yours because this is a really big shark and they're very thin muscles. So don't feel bad if this didn't come out quite so well on yours. But you can see there's this deeper layer in there, and that's the interhyoideus. And those fibers are running across from the serrato-hyal cartilage of one side to the serrato-hyal of the other. And you see that in here. This guy. And so for a lot of you, what happened was you just went through both layers at the same time, and that's understandable. Okay. Behind the inner hyoideus, there's a little region that is not actually attached onto any skeletal elements, but it sits here in the wall of that first branchial pouch, basically between the hyoid arch and the first branchial arch. And that muscle, even though it's continuous with the inner hyoideus, is called the ventral hyoid constrictor muscle, because it's just constricting the pouch. It's not actually hooking onto any skeletal elements. So those are ventral hyoid muscles. Dorsally, a hyoid includes this big muscle right behind the spiracle, and that lifts up the hyomandibula, that cartilage, or hyomandibular cartilage to be precise, this cartilage that runs down from the otic capsule to the region of the jaw joint, kind of buttresses the jaw. And that, since it lifts up the hyomandibula, would be called the levator hyomandibulae. Exactly. Yes, that's levator hyomandibulae there. And then right behind it, and not very distinct, is this muscle in here, which is the dorsal hyoid constrictor. And the fibers seem continuous, but you can see that this muscle actually is attaching here to a skeletal element, whereas this just runs around in the wall of that branchial pouch. So the best place to separate them is right at that region of the jaw joint. You can kind of see that there's a division there. So you guys over on this side, so you couldn't see. Here's levator hyomandibulae. This is the dorsal hyoid constrictor, and that's that division right there. That you can make between them. Okay. You see that? Okay. All right. Come take a peek. Don't be shy.